Michigan is a bunch of dirty, no good cheaters. But should they get the college football death penalty? Let's talk about it.
FanBuzz Weekly starts now.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to FanBuzz Weekly. I am your host, Tyler, joined alongside Patrick and Will. A lot to cover for spooky season. Really excited to get into it, but we have to start. Actually, I want to start with something else real quick. Patrick, did you watch any fun college football games on Saturday?
Look, we don't need to talk about it. I actually didn't watch it. He's talking about the Florida-Georgia game.
You didn't watch?
I was at the Texas-BYU game, and I'm damn glad I did not watch that atrocity. I got a lot of comments, though, because I wore a Gator jersey, and people were like, yeah, go Gators, because everyone hates the Bulldogs. They're like most hated team in college football right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good about being a Georgia Bulldogs fan, but that's obviously not why we're here. I have to have a little bit of fun with Patrick while we're at it. But biggest story of college football the past week or so, the Michigan Wolverines, Jim Harbaugh, sign-stealing allegations, Connor Stallions, who no one knew about as of, a week and a half ago. But this is probably the biggest story of the college football season. Accusations about sign stealing, NCAA investigations, possible FBI investigations, a lot going on here. And the question is, what's going to happen to Michigan? What's going to happen to Jim Harbaugh? Does Michigan deserve the death penalty? Is Jim Harbaugh ever going to coach college again once this investigation's done? The amount of evidence that's being leaked is overwhelming. But why don't we start there with the death penalty? Do you think these allegations are strong enough, if this turns out to be true, to be deserving of the death penalty? And I feel like we should start with Will as the Michigan alumni. I think that just is appropriate.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here. First of all, I do want to say that obviously cheating's wrong. If it is concretely determined that we broke the rules, we deserve to be punished in some capacity. But based on what's out now, and again, if more comes out, my stance will obviously change. But as of what's out right now, the death penalty is extreme overkill, I think. I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. That's one of the worst things that can happen to a program. Breaking the rules is wrong, but I don't think there's any way that iPhone videos from publicly available seats at nationally televised games provide the enough of a competitive advantage. They constitute enough of a violation relative to what everyone else does. I mean, Ohio State scouted the college football playoff semifinal with the NCAA's permission. It's wild that they would allow that if, after that request, if it was that grievous of a sin, really. Also, Connor Stallions did not cover his tracks at all. All. He was using his own name to buy tickets, his own credit card. He was Venmoing people, and he wasn't even. I make my Venmos private just because I feel like it, and he wasn't even doing it when he was theoretically executing this giant side stealing scandal. I genuinely think that there may have been people that did not know that what they were doing was illegal at all, because it seems so tame compared to what happens in college football. But is Jim Harbaugh done? I'm glad you made the distinction. Is he done in college? He is done in college. Not today, not tomorrow. Probably, I think he'll finish the season because the NCAA moves so slowly. And I mean, Michigan still has a chance to accomplish great things, of course, but he's not going to sit and wait for the NCAA to tell him he's done. He's going to the NFL this year. He'll be a Bear. He'll be a Raider. Something like that. But I don't know. I'm disappointed. Obviously, it's not what you want to see, but let's see Michigan run the table. With this news breaking, there's no way they keep doing what they were doing, and there's no way that everyone else is going to keep their signs. So I think it doesn't make everything right, but I think it would feel a lot better if Michigan was able to win fair and square the rest of the way.
I do think it's interesting about the timing because Michigan is probably one of the biggest stories in college football just on the field because they're dominating on these lesser opponents. Do you just kind of let this season go by until it's over and then address it after the end of the season? Patrick, when do you think a punishment's going to happen? What do you think the punishment's going to be? And then what do you think about Harbaugh's future?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I have no answer. I feel like this story just keeps evolving more and more. Like you keep hearing more details. You keep seeing more videos of what was coming out. To be honest, I can't really keep up with it, and I don't really want to. I'm just waiting for what the actual determination is. I have a question. Who do you guys think will be in their position longer, Jim Harbaugh or Dabo Swinney?
Ooh, that's tough.
Because I think Clemson's right now, Dabo's not going to last long.
I think it's Swinney.
I think so too. First of all, I don't think he's going to get outright fired after winning 2 rings for a program that really doesn't have that history.
True.
And it's going to be more of a slow burn. I'm a Patriots fan. I'm seeing Bill Belichick. this whole absolute not going with grace on top. Dabo's going to limp out. He's been an amazing coach, but this is not his era with the portal and everything. So I think he's got at least another season, but Jim is going to be gone. He's going to be in Chicago or Vegas starting next fall.
Hey, don't forget about Green Bay. Things might escalate really badly out there. I think this story is fascinating because we could tackle it from like 1,000 different angles. We could talk about Stallion's LinkedIn page where he basically admits that he steals signs. We can talk about the videos in the Ohio State game where they're looking at the signals and adjusting their entire defense on the fly. From a coach's perspective, I think this is fascinating because teams are always trying to steal signs. It just doesn't usually happen this far in advance, right? We are trying to decipher signs in the middle of a game and try and predict where that's happening. Or let's say when we're exchanging film, if we're able to see signs on the sideline or if they're on a broadcast, we're trying to look at those signs, trying to determine. Sometimes a coach will look through an entire season's worth of games, trying to find those little snippets to get some information. It is incredible the lengths coaches go to. This is where we get past that gray area. A great example, Brent Venables is someone that's really known as being a great interpreter of opponent signs and adjusting defenses on the fly. But this, going weeks in advance, going to games, recording the entire sideline, something you'll actually see on college sidelines to prevent this. If you are watching a game, like I went to Indiana homecoming against Rutgers, and they use signals with dummy quarterbacks, coaches, all of this. But behind them, they have these giant tarps that they will fan out, and then they will collapse after the signal's done. And the reason they do that is to prevent opponents from seeing in the press box what signs they're running. So there are all kind of ways teams go about trying to get signs or protect their signs, all these signals. But in reality, I think all of this is going to lead to one very simple solution. And Nick Saban's already talked about this. We just need freaking radios in the helmets. It's preposterous that college football does not have this. The NFL has it. The XFL has done it with all 22 players on the field where everyone can have a radio. So you don't even have to relay the signal to the quarterback or the linebacker and have him, voice it out. It's an extremely simple solution to get rid of sign stealing. I think it's going to be implemented because this story is starting to expand on what's gray area and what is a problem. And I think just having communication in the helmet gets rid of signs. It just, kind of gets rid of this entire issue and we no longer have scandals about it. Do you guys think that's an easy enough solution?
I was going to say, I think that's easy, and I don't understand why it's not already in place. Why hasn't that been a thing? Like, what are the drawbacks to doing that?
I have kind of a thought. I mean, we know that not every school has the same. The theoretical reason this whole rule exists, and I should like to say the way the media has treated this, I know we're part of the media, but a lot of outlets have called it in headlines a sign stealing scandal. Sign stealing is not illegal. What this is a game attending scandal. Mm-hmm. That's a terrible headline, but that's what it is. And the reason that rule exists, in theory, is to not provide an advantage to the schools that can afford to send people to all these programs, which I think is a fallacy. You give a student, graduate, intern 2 course hour credits to go scout a game, they do it. But point aside, that's why it exists, and that's got to be why we don't have radios, so that you're not making, I don't know, we'll get to them maybe later, but Kent State spend the same amount of money on a helmet communication system as, let's just say, Michigan. I think it has to be an equality thing, but it's gone too far. It's hurting quality of competition. So it's time. It's not that expensive.
What's really funny is, this communication system has existed since the 1990s. And if you actually look in what goes into the NFL's communication system, it is literally just radios. There's no high-tech thing they put. They just stick a radio behind the pads of the helmet, and then you can hear. So it really isn't a cost thing, I don't think, especially with how much money we're spending on equipment for football programs, even at the high school level. I just think that this is something that needs to happen. But just an absolutely fascinating story. Again, I feel like we could talk 2 hours about this and attack every single angle. We could go into the NCAA TV rating, Fox broadcast, Big Ten conspiracies that they're out for Jim Harbaugh, all of that. But I think we've covered it enough. I think we tackled it from a lot of good angles. There's obviously more than just Michigan and sign stealing that we can talk about with this college football weekend, because we probably have one of the biggest games of the year in LSU and Alabama this week. This is a game where Alabama absolutely needs to win to keep their hopes alive for the playoff, which, by the way, we were talking weeks ago about how this season might be a train wreck with Jalen Milroe, and all of a sudden, one lost team right in the thick of it. But is Alabama going to avenge this loss from last year when they lost to LSU? Is this Jaden Daniels' Heisman moment, or is the defense going to stop them? Patrick, let's start with you. What are you looking for in this game? What do you think is going to happen? Does Alabama keep their playoff hopes alive?
Yeah, I think they do. I would never bet against Nick Saban. Like, I just, that's the smart choice. I mean, I know Jaden Daniels is this and that, but Alabama's at home. Like, I just don't I don't see LSU pulling it off. The only thing is, with Alabama's shakiness at quarterback, maybe there's something there. But hasn't LSU's defense been terrible this year? So, I mean, Alabama at home against a defense that has given up a lot. I don't really see them struggling. Of course, it's a rivalry game. And, as we've seen in the Iron Bowl in years past, you never really know what's going to happen when you go into the game. But I'm not betting against Alabama and Nick Saban.
Will, what are your thoughts?
I might be betting against Alabama and Nick Saban. Credit to them. They could have folded after Texas season and era could have been over, but they've been fighting. They're lucky to be at home, or else this wouldn't even be a discussion for me, I think. But I still think LSU is still going to be too much for them. It's a Heisman moment of sorts for Jaden Daniels. I don't think he's going to get it still, but LSU has been beaten by great offenses this year. They got outgunned by Florida State. They got outgunned by Ole Miss. They haven't gotten clamped. Nobody has clamped them. And Alabama's only route to winning this game is limiting LSU offensively. I think LSU's still going to score. Alabama's not going to keep up with them. And Tyler, you mentioned how Alabama needs this for their college football playoff hopes. LSU's not out. We haven't seen a 2-loss team make it, but they have a path. If they win this game, one of their losses is non-conference. They win this game, win the West. I know you don't want to hear it, Tyler, but they could beat Georgia. That is an 11-2 team that makes the playoffs as a 2 or 3 seed.
For sure. I do think this is a fascinating case for LSU because they've done nothing but put up points. I mean, that loss against Ole Miss was probably one of those fun college football games of the year. It was what both teams scored in the 50s. Just neither team could be stopped, and Alabama just doesn't have that firepower. They do have absolutely loaded talent on defense that, like you said, could put the clamps down. But I'm the first one to admit that I was very wrong about Jaden Daniels this year. I was not sold on him. And, I always look at everything from an NFL prospect lens, and man, Jaden Daniels has impressed me. He had 17 touchdowns and 3 interceptions last year. Obviously, this season's not over. 25 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, another 5 on the ground. Just become a more dynamic, true dual threat, where last year he was relying more on his legs. This year, he really is more of a capable passer. With Malik Neighbors, with all this firepower and speed on offense, I don't know how Alabama contains it. And, let's say we get into a shootout. I just don't see enough bullets in the chamber for Alabama's offense. Just Jalen Milroe is still not sold on. I think the only path to victory for the Crimson Tide is a defensive show-up performance where they just shut down this LSU offense. But again, that's just not a path I can see. That being said, which team's more likely? Do we see an Alabama team in the playoff? Do we see LSU? Or we just think that's not really possible for either?
It's possible. I'm not predicting it. I'm not picking against Georgia and both of these teams. Obviously, if there was a scenario with both teams making it to the SEC title game undefeated, both probably go in. But I think Alabama actually might have a better shot in that one. I think they just square up better with Georgia and could win a defensive kind of brawl rather than a shootout that LSU would want. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to see 13-0 Georgia again.
It's interesting because when you look at LSU's schedule, if they beat Alabama, if they beat Florida, who else do they have? But then if they beat Georgia, you might be right. Those quality of wins with Alabama and Georgia alone, who knows what happens with the rest of, if you looked out in the Pac-12 or whatever. But we could be talking about a 2-loss team in the playoff, which I'm sure LSU fans did not expect when they had their second loss. I'm sure they were kind of writing themselves off.
Speaking of the Pac-12, glad you brought it up. We got to talk about Colorado because, it is a college football show. We'd be remiss without talking about Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. Crushing loss against UCLA. Really hung in there, but 28-16 loss. Buffaloes are now 4-4. Bowl eligibility, which, early in the season seemed like almost a certainty. Now doesn't even seem likely. And Deion's son, Shador, is just getting absolutely destroyed. So if you guys were Coach Prime, let's just ask it this way. What are you doing to fix this team for next year? And what are the positives you're going to build on? Let's start with Will.
Yeah, you made a good point. It's about building for next year. I would cut your losses. There have already been some huge successes. Programs in the National I picked up some big wins. This season is what it is. It's not going to be a bowl, I don't think. So it's all about the future. Got to protect Travis. He's been fighting through some stuff. Might want to crank down his snap count quite a bit. Got to protect Shador. I don't think you can fix the O-line immediately. Maybe you're just calling plays to get the ball out of his hands fast and pulling him in gains earlier. And you got to work on convincing guys to stay another year. This is a project. It's not an immediate fix. And Dion loves the transfer portal. I don't know what the rules are about talking to prospects. I don't know how closely those rules are enforced, but this is when you have to start talking to people in any capacity or legally able. Dion's mentioned that he wants, I think he said 6 or more dogs. So he's got to go and figure out how to get those guys, whether that's recruiting or the portal. It's all about next season, but I think he's done enough to brand his team and bring in some talent.
Pardon the terrible pun, but Colorado's season was over in a flash. Honestly, look at this mask. It broke while I put it on. I'm so mad about that because this was expensive. They were over in a flash. It is kind of wild to see the ride that it's been. But yeah, I mean, I think my biggest issue with Dion's response is, I don't know. It feels like a lack of responsibility on his part, trashing his offensive line, saying he's going to go get new linemen. Like, if I'm an offensive lineman for Colorado, what am I thinking after that? If my coach is basically like, I suck. Like, what? Like, I think it's just kind of him, I don't know, spiraling, or I don't think he's been used to losing like this. And he's not going to put up with it. Like Will said, he's going to go recruit. He's going to go do what he needs to do. But Prime's response has been, I don't know, off-putting in my opinion.
Yeah, the comments about the offensive line really surprised me because, we all know he's not wrong. The offensive line has been a huge issue all year. And for all of his son's talents at quarterback, just the pass protection has been awful. But to say it out loud and in the way he said it, with everything else about this team where he's been very supportive of players and, holding everyone accountable and things like that, to talk about replacing kids, especially in the transfer portal era, just feels a little ugly. I know that this is an experiment about whether or not the transfer portal is a sustainable way to build out a program. But for the way that he's doing it and the short-term view of things, they are still kids. You got to find a way to support them. And again, we all know they're going to recruit and get transfers for the offensive line. There is no question about that, especially if Shedeur is staying for next season. Just the way he went about it feels a little ugly, and I didn't love that. But that being said, they could lose the rest of their games in a 4-win season. In my eyes, if we're talking about the Colorado Buffaloes program, is a success, especially in a hyper-competitive Pac-12 conference. They are moving to the Big 12 next year. We are already seeing that some of the recruiting is paying off. They got a 4-star quarterback. They're starting to make some noise. And as Will pointed out, the brand is stronger than it could have ever possibly been, especially if Dion is in it for the long haul. So there are things to build on. They have star power. They are going to get more stars in the transfer portal. I have no doubt about that. With the NIL opportunities this program is bringing, I'm just not anticipating anything less than a big step forward again in 2024. But again, just there's some sour taste in my mouth with some of those reactions from Dion. I get it. You're emotional after a loss, but let's see how he responds, because everything else he's done as a coach, I was initially skeptical and I've been bought in. It's just that comment did surprise me. So we'll see what happens with Colorado. I don't anticipate any more wins, but that will not keep us from talking about him. I can assure you that much. That being said, we're looking ahead. College football playoff rankings out this week. There is no clear lock for the playoff right now, which is making the season even more exciting. I know we came into the season knowing it was going to be a good one, but wow, there's a lot of interesting talk about who's in the top 4, who's just outside. Because it's spooky season, Halloween, all of that, we want to take a look out of all the contending college football playoff teams. Wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Which team has the scariest remaining schedule on the slate? Patrick, why don't you start?
To me, it feels like Washington, right? They still have USC with Caleb Williams. They have Utah, who beat USC. I think they have Oregon State, who's ranked. That's just, you feel like they're going to slip up one of those games, if not more. And the Pac-12 has been so tough. So, it feels like they're going to have to outscore those teams. And Michael Penix needs to kind of do what Caleb Williams has had to do early in the season, is just put up more points than the other team. It feels like a no-brainer to me. So hopefully you guys have other teams there. I'm not taking the obvious one.
Yeah, I was going to say Washington, and the main reason being Kyle Whittingham and Utah. That is the scariest coach to play against in college football, because that man is just a college football playoff killer when it comes to hopes, just because every single year there is a Pac-12 team that makes a lot of noise, and Utah's like, oh, that's a nice playoff resume you have. It'd be a shame if someone added another loss to it. I would be terrified of playing Utah at any point in the season. Will, what about you? Who do you got?
Man, that is just the most Pac-12 thing. It's been so good, it's been too good top to bottom, and you see all these 2-loss champs, 2015 Stanford. I'm not going to get into that team. I will say Washington dodges an absolute bullet by hosting Utah instead of going to Rice-Eccles. Toughest road environment in the Pac-12 by a country mile and one of the toughest in the country. All respect to the SEC and Big Ten. I was going to say Washington too, because I think when we're looking at these playoff contenders, you have to be thinking about the conference title game matchup. Yep. And that's going to probably be Oregon, it's really tough to sweep a team who's that good. And Washington already has one win over them. To say someone that Pat didn't say, we could talk Michigan, finally going to have to play some teams, and everyone's going to be extra fired up. But that conference title game is going to be probably a joke for the third straight year. Sorry, Tyler, we're going to go with Georgia. They have to play 14 Missouri, 11 Ole Miss, 19 Tennessee, and so all ranked teams. 3 in a row after basically playing no one all year, and a very frisky Georgia Tech, who I'll talk about in a later segment. And then, of course, that title game is going to be Alabama or LSU. I thought Georgia was going to have a cakewalk. Some of these teams look a lot better than I thought they were going to. It's a tough run-in for the Dogs. I think they've got it in them, but it's a scary, scary schedule.
Yeah, man, you guys are making me scramble because you took both of my top 2 picks, so I appreciate that. I think if we're just ranking them properly, the 1, 2, 3 is appropriate because 1, Washington, easy. 2 at Georgia, and then I guess we got to go with Alabama. Then I know we already talked about them, but that LSU matchup scary. I know Kentucky's no longer ranked, but that is a team that can surprise you, especially with their rushing attack. Chattanooga is not a serious game, but you have the Iron Bowl. And as we know, we've seen some absolutely wild moments in the Iron Bowl. I still vividly remember where I was and everything when the kick 6 happened and just being left absolutely speechless. So I guess I'll go Alabama because it feels like the rest of these contenders, at least looking through haphazardly last second. I mean, Texas, Florida State, they just have some cakewalks before their conference championships if they make it. So we'll go with Alabama, especially because of the inconsistency with that program. But, who knows? We could see an upset from Texas and Florida State. Stranger things have absolutely happened in college football. But it is gearing up for a thrilling final 4 or 5 weeks of the season. Cannot wait to see what happens. But let's go ahead and get into our betting section. Will's favorite. He is our resident degenerate. I do like to help out a little bit with this, but we're going to take the over this week with Take the Over. I'm still going to give Patrick some crap because this man decided to go with Iowa, Minnesota a couple weeks ago. What was that final score? 12-10.
Well, just wait for today.
Yeah. Are you riding? Are you riding with
Iowa Northwestern? It's the lowest over under ever. 29.5. Yeah. Eventually it's got to hit, right? Like,
oh man. Yeah. Okay. Expound. Why do you think that the lowest over under ever is going to hit the over?
To be honest with you, I don't have a good explanation. I can't tell you. I can't tell you why, but I'm here for the chaos. I'm here for the craziness. If you're going to listen to one person about betting, it's not me, it's Will. Like, let's do whatever I say, do the opposite. No, I mean, to take one nugget of information, Northwestern scored 33 in their last game. That's promising. Like, that's already more than the 29.5 that the total is. But I think after a terrible pick last week, I got to keep riding with Iowa. I'm just going to keep going. Eventually, they're going to do it. My Hawkeyes are going to do it.
I just think you're a complete psychopath for continually betting on Iowa overs. I admire it, though. I truly admire it. Will, who do you got for the over?
Dude, that is crazy. My biggest cash cow this year by far has been every Big Ten under. It's been an absolute machine. So we're going to go to the other part of the country. Actually, I guess this will be a Big Ten game next year. USC and Washington. I know this is a high number. It's 76.5, but come on. Yeah, it must be done. We're talking about Washington getting into the 50s pretty comfortably. 4th offense by EPA per play against USC's defense, which ranks 99th. USC's offense faltered a little bit lately, still 8th in EPA per play, and Washington's defense is better than USC's, but not good. This is just an old-fashioned West Coast shootout. Pac-12 night game, one of the last ones ever, unfortunately. There's going to be a lot of points. It could be one-sided and still hit. We could be talking about like a 50-30 score here and still hit this comfortably. So I'm excited to sweat this one, but it might not even be a sweat. This one might hit early 4th quarter.
One I really enjoy, I'm just going to go ACC, Florida State and Pitt, 51.5. So, not breaking the bank like that outrageous 76 number or whatever that was. But I'm in love with Florida State's offense. Even if Johnny Wilson doesn't play, who was out last week, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, Jaheim Bell, all, Travis or Jordan Travis. Just that offense is firing on all cylinders right now. And Pitt's given up a ton of points. 58-7 lost to Notre Dame last week. Had a 38-21 win over Louisville. And Florida State's defense has had some lapses at times. I can see, 35, 42 points by Florida State, with Pittsburgh sneaking in a couple scores on some possessions, pretty comfortably hitting that over. So I am going there. So if you want to power rank the picks that I would recommend, I'm just going to take Patrick number 1, because sometimes things that defy all logic just hit in betting, as I found. Sorry, Will, you'll be 1B, and then you can take mine last. But I just love Patrick's energy on it. So
like eventually I was going to do it. Like, they can't always be under, right?
Yeah. It's the George Costanza theory that if everything in your gut says, or all your instincts are thinking that, something's right, then the opposite has to be correct.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll go with there. But moving on, let's go to Did You See This? Just some of your favorite moments from the college football weekend. I've got to share mine. It just cracks me up. It's my new favorite stat of all time. Utah backup quarterback Bryson Barnes started last week against Oregon, and the Fox broadcast showed this graphic that he grew up raising approximately 12,000 pigs, and they highlighted the 12,000 and said that is the most in the FBS. And all I want to know is if Fox hired an intern to specifically research how many pigs every single quarterback or college football player in the FBS raised. I'm convinced there's no way anyone did the research for that, correct?
12,000? Where do you put 12,000 pigs? Like, what does that look like?
Well, not at the same time. I'm just assuming over his lifetime.
I'm like 12,000 pigs in one area?
I don't know that much about raising hogs, but I just want to know what do you guys think is the worst job? Being the random person that Connor Stallions hit up on Instagram to go watch Iowa versus Northwestern, or being the SEC Fox intern who had to go to every hog farm in the South and try and figure out which D1 football players raising the most pigs?
That's amazing. Yeah, what would be easier, going to the pig farms to figure it out, or going to all the teams and be like, did any of your players ever raise pigs? That is a tough job. I would not. I'm just convinced they were just like, there's no way anyone else has raised as many, and just kind of sent it.
I agree with that. There's no way anyone raised more, because why would they do that?
I can't wait for a school to be like, actually, you should have done research here. Yeah.
What was the trophy?
Yeah.
There was a trophy we were talking about, which is like a 93-pound pig, right? I mean, maybe someone in that game.
It all comes full circle on this podcast.
That needs to be the unofficial mascot / trophy of FanBuzz Weekly. is the hog trophy. Oh my gosh!
What is it? The Floyd of Rose. I should have been that for Halloween.
Floyd of Rosedale.
That would have been the most perfect costume you could have ever worn. Patrick, then what do you got for Did You See This week?
You guys probably saw it, but it was NC State's head coach Dave Doran responding to Steve Smith. What was it, at halftime during his when they were interviewing? So Steve Smith on game day said, NC State, they're waiting for basketball to start. They're a basketball school. And Doran, the head coach, they'd go on to win this game, so it looks really good for him. But he goes, tell Steve Smith in the studio, this ain't a basketball school. He can kiss my ass, which is just like the perfect, mid-game interview, like moment. The good thing is they're all good. I guess Steve Smith, texted him after congratulating him, and Doran invited him to come to the sidelines for a game. So there is a happy ending, but man, what a football guy, just to, middle of the game to be thinking of what Steve Smith was saying on game day. Like, I love it.
Professional athletes and coaches, man, they're competitive people. They'll use any slight against them as motivation. So I respect it, honestly. And obviously it's coming from Steve Smith, one of the greatest trash talkers in sports history. So loved that. Will, what about you?
Yeah, this isn't a moment as much as just a crazy result as part of a crazy trend. I'm sure we all saw Georgia Tech ended North Carolina's season, took them down. But Georgia Tech, they're having a weird year. First of all, they've won every even-numbered game and lost every odd-numbered game. They've won games 2, 4, 6, and 8. And game 10 is Clemson, and game 12 is Georgia. So just keep your eyes out for those. Secondly, they've played 3 ranked teams. All of them have been ranked exactly 17th. And Georgia Tech is, at the time of playing, obviously, we can't have 3 17s at the same time. Georgia Tech is 2-1 in those games. Their 2 wins over ranked teams are the most of any team in the state of Georgia, and their last 4 games are an 11-point loss to Bowling Green, a win over 17 Miami, a 15-point loss to BC, who is going to a bowl, and that UNC win. I mean, the win over Miami itself was ridiculous with that take a knee situation. They also have scored 254 points, allowed 254, scored 33 touchdowns, allowed 33. They've been wacky every week, but they're still the most normal team in the country on the aggregate. So that's my did you see this, and make sure you continue to see what Georgia Tech does this year, because it might include a win over number 1 Georgia.
Oh man, I didn't need to hear that part. I'm getting a little nervous now. We'll see what happens with the Bulldogs. We'll see.
Sounds like there's like some sort of even odd curse going on in Georgia Tech, so I'm here for that.
I only read about half of the tweet that I was looking at. You could even boil it down to quarters. In their last win, they had no points in the first and third quarters and 46 points in the even numbered quarter. I have so much more on this. It's insane.
That's incredible. Well, really enjoyed talking with both of you. I'm glad that we covered the subjects we did, especially, Michigan, LSU, Bama. This has really been a very fun college football season. So for everyone listening, thank you so much. This is FanBuzz Weekly. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Will. Thank you, AJ, in the back for production. Really appreciate that. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. That is in the episode description wherever you are watching. But we'll see you next week, hopefully with some resolutions on some of these stories. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Just the thought of Jim Harbaugh putting this tattoo on his shoulder and maybe wearing, like a shirt that shows it off at a game one time is just like sending me right now.